Y'all fine.
And Dave, you're up.
Well, welcome and happy holidays. It's hard to believe that we are actually wrapping up our last one, the 12th seminar of the year. And the plan tonight is to have Michelle go over all of the highlights of the last 11 seminars. And we're happy to have Michelle with us today, all decked out in her Santa Georgia University of Georgia Bulldogs Santa hat. So take it away, Michelle.
Well, thank you. You know, they do say it is the most wonderful time of the year. Go Dogs. Well, guys, it is great being with you again. Let me share my screen, and we are just going to hop into 2022 highlights as we look at the first ever financial wellness seminar series that we put on. So let me pull this up, and guys, if you can just give me a high sign that you can see the screen. Perfect. Okay, guys, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at 2022. We're going to hit on all of the different things that we've talked about and the kind of the highlights of each one of those. So my request is, Dave and Kim, as always, thank you guys for being here, for co-hosting with us on this. But if you have something that's stuck out to you, or a hot topic that you're like, oh, that really resonated, just to chime in as well so they don't get tired of just hearing my voice today. Sound good? Perfect.
Sounds like a plan.
I like it. I like it. Well then, guys, just to take a quick look again, I am Michelle Crumley. I have been your host this year as we have delved into everything from the basics of you're thinking about buying a home, you're thinking about starting your wealth management plan, you're taking a look at, what does it take to get qualified? What type of loans are there that are out there, especially in our world, right? The VA loan. And then talking about all of the different things once you own it, as an investment, as your primary residence, and then even getting into things such as that financial planning, estate planning. And then we ended like last month with the long-term care and thinking about what comes, in those twilight years as we proceed. So we're going to take a look at the highlights from each one of these, and just a reminder of what we talked about. I think those key points, and then also remind you who was with us. And then when we wrap up, make sure you guys know how to reach me. You guys know how to reach Dave and Kim at the association if you do have any questions and reaching out with that. So again, I am your host, Michelle Crumley. I am a 30-year military now veteran spouse of the community. Go Dogs, go Georgia. For those that know Mike, this is all a testament to him. So let's just delve in, as we've got about an hour to spend together today. So we started in January talking about the VA loan itself, and kind of just want to hit some of the things. And this is the newest thing that has come out with VA. For those, and we'll talk about this in just a second, but for those that do have to pay attention to county loan limits, the 2023 VA max and actually conventional, all the loan limits are out for 2023. And VA follows conventional, but the new max loan limit for conventional and VA financing went up from 647 up to 726,200 in most counties across the U.S., including here in the Hampton Roads area. It does get a little higher out there in our San Diego, up in Seattle, New York, a lot of those high cost areas. But for the most part across the U.S., that max county loan limit, if you're held to it, is the 726,200. You can start using that now. And then for anything that closes after January 1st. So very excited about that. We talked about, and really it goes with any of the topics, is always make sure you're working with an expert in that area. And the VA loan is absolutely one of those, right? So there are a lot of nuances with different loan programs, and the VA is not any different. So you always want to make sure that no matter who you're using, whoever your loan officer is, whatever that company is, that they are experts in VA lending and the military and veteran community. And we know with the VA loan that you can use and reuse your VA loan benefits multiple times. So it's not a one and done. You've got a bank of entitlement and you can use it, put it back in the bank, reuse it, all of those components. So I think that's important to understand. And another takeaway, a big one, is that you can have more than one VA loan at a time. And it all has to do with your entitlement, whether you have full entitlement, meaning that you do not have your VA benefits, your VA loan benefits in use on any other property, or maybe in a short sale or foreclosure that VA took a loss on. So you don't have any entitlement in play. That's full entitlement, and you are not held to a max loan limit when you are doing a loan, just what you qualify for. VA will guarantee that. If you do have entitlement in use, so you're looking at having maybe 2 VA loans at a time, you are held to the county loan limits of where you are buying or where that property is located. And then that property gets factored in with, there's math that's involved, but you take that max loan limit for that county, subtract what you have in use, and that tells you what you have available for that 100% financing or what a down payment might look at. But you can absolutely have more than one VA loan at a time. It all depends on your entitlement that you have available.
So Michelle,
Mhm.
so you used your VA loan one time and you sold the property and you got your VA loan entitlement back.
Mhm.
How do you find out, and who do you call, or how do you go about being able to reuse that VA loan entitlement?
Absolutely. So there is a restoration of that benefit. So all you need to do is reach out to your loan officer, who can pull your certificate of eligibility. That certificate of eligibility will show whether you have any entitlement in use, or that VA thinks that you might still own the property on that had a VA loan. And that loan officer can work with you to get like evidence that you've paid that loan off and you sold the property, and they can get that entitlement restored for you lickety split. Yeah, a lot of times in a matter of hours, get that COE updated so your full entitlement is restored.
Okay.
Great call out on that. And thinking about this, right? So October last year, a year ago, the largest VA loan that was going through VA's pipeline was $9 million, 100% financing, no down payment, no mortgage insurance. So the idea that VA is just for first-time home buyers, that's malarkey. VA loan, Mike and I have used ours, his, not mine, it's his, a number of times now. And we will continue to use it. If it is an owner-occupied property, it is the best loan program that I believe that is out there for our community. It is a requirement that if you are using your VA loan, that you are purchasing an owner-occupied primary residence, whether you're purchasing or it's a refinance, except for that VA interest rate reduction, i.e. streamline refinance program that's out there. And that's if you're going from a VA to a VA, right? You're refinancing your current VA loan into a new VA loan just to reduce the interest rate and terms, like we'll probably be doing next year for everybody that purchased this year when those rates come down a little bit. In that case, if that property is now currently a rental, VA still allows you to do the refinance on that. But that's the only time. If you're using your VA loan for anything else, a refinance into a VA, you're pulling money out, or you're purchasing, it needs to be owner occupied primary residence. Takeaway there. Another call out that I like to make sure that everybody's aware of, because it is a passive income stream, is if you are looking to purchase, VA has a number of different property types that they do finance. But the one I always like to call out to our community is that you can do a multi-unit property. You can purchase a duplex, a triplex, up to a fourplex. You just have to live in one side of that. And that is considered your primary residence. You can rent out the other three. Then when either you move because you're retiring, you move because a job takes you somewhere else, or you got new orders, then you can rent out that fourth unit that you were occupying and buy a new home in the new location. So that 4-unit, great passive income, but it does, again, if you're purchasing a multi-unit, you're going to have to live in one side. And then that funding fee, right? So if you're not exempt from the funding fee, which the vast majority of those that have retired, again, in our community, or that have transitioned out after any length of time in, you likely have a disability rating of some sort. Anything greater than 0, that VA funding fee is waived. Or if you're still in and you have a Purple Heart, your VA funding fee is waived. But this is also why it's important to work with that VA expert, because there are ways through down payments to mitigate that funding fee if you owe it, especially if you're a second-time user. But VA also understands it's a hardship and allows you to roll that into the loan in the event that it is owed, and you don't want to liquidate assets at closing to pay that particular fee. Other fees will have to be paid, but that fee could be rolled into the loan. And then lastly, going back up to the top, the reason that we love the VA loan is in so many cases, it's 100% financing. You don't have to make a down payment. And on top of that, so that keeps your out-of-pocket costs lower up front, no down payment, and then no monthly mortgage insurance, right? So you don't have an increase in that monthly payment because you didn't put a down payment down, so that monthly payment stays lower because you don't have any private monthly mortgage insurance. So this was January's topic this year. So like 11, 12 months ago, we were talking about the VA loan. We took that and we rolled right into, then, if we're talking about qualifying for loans, we wanted to talk about income, right? Because, and we did. In February, Ben Smith joined me. He is a loan officer that has been part of my team for a number of years. And we talked really about all the different types of income sources there are, what can be used, what can't be used, and why. There aren't a whole lot of takeaways unless you want to get into the nitty-gritty, in which case you can catch, right, February's replay. It's out there on the UDT SEAL Wellness with Caliber YouTube channel. And I also know that I believe, Kim, wasn't that sent out to everybody afterwards as well? They got that replay link. Yep, I thought so.
Yeah, that is correct.
Perfect. Okay, so when we talk about income, when we talk about qualifying, right, it's great that you have income coming in the front door, but it's important that we make sure for qualifying for mortgages that that income is considered reliable, stable, and likely to continue. So, right, you've received it in the past, you've received it currently, and the amount makes sense, it's logical, and there is a very likelihood that it is going to continue for the foreseeable future. When we talk about that, really the general rule of thumb is a 2-year history of income receipt. So when we talk about, okay, self-employment, what's your 2-year history? That's the way that we prove that it is reliable, consistent, stable, and likely to continue. If we're talking about bonus income, or we're talking about commission income, or we're talking about second jobs, or that gig job that you've got on the side, or your seasonal employment, if you're looking to use that income for qualifying purposes, what's the history on that? General rule of thumb is 2 years, especially on those special types of income. For your employment income, it is possible that maybe there's some schooling involved that led up to you in the job that you are now. But we're going to take a hard look at the income perspective, what you've done in the past, what the current situation is, and what that trajectory is looking in the future. And we also talk, because I think that in our realm, when it comes to our active duty as well as our veterans, is we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the fact that if you are transitioning out of the military while you're thinking of or in the process of purchasing or even refinancing, if you're within 12 months of exiting the military, the active duty income that you are making today cannot be used for qualifying because we know it's ending. So I think that that is really, really important, whether you're looking at your own situation or you're looking at family members or friends that you know are in this process. I don't want anyone to ever get kind of sideways on this because it is not pleasant to learn when you're halfway to the finish line or getting ready to go to closing and it pops up that you are retiring or getting out, and all of a sudden that income that was being used to qualify you can't be used any longer. So I think that's just a good call out. We talked about that a little bit more detail along with all of the different incomes and different income streams and types of income back from February. So check that out. Dave, I see you pop back on. You got some thoughts?
I just have one question. What is the current rule or state of play when it comes to the use of rental income?
So that is a great question. So a lot of rental income depends on whether or not it is the property that you are in now. Let's say I'm buying another house, I'm keeping this house as a rental and I'm going to turn it into an investment property. I'm going to keep it. There are different rules. VA says we just really need a lease agreement. Conventional says you may have to actually qualify with that whole payment if you don't have a history of renting. So that really kind of depends on the type of loan. As for if you have investment property, then your loan officer is going to ask for your 2 years tax returns to see what you've shown in the way of incomes or losses on that property that can then be used to offset the mortgage payment if you have one, and be able to kind of maybe even add potentially some income if it is running in the green, right? If it's running in the red, then you may have a little bit of debt that has to be counted on that. So again, they're really looking at 2 years. That's the rule of thumb. Have we done it less than 2 years with good compensating factors? And if it makes logical sense, we can, but it is a case by case basis. General rule of thumb, 2 years.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Anything else that kind of jogged your memory or things that you had questions on when it came to income?
Nope.
So February, this past year, all the different kinds of income streams, Ben and I kind of breaking those down, what can and can't be used. In March, we moved into really starting to think about planning for your overall financial success. We had Scott Williams with us, financial advisor with Teal Financial Advisors, a little company that he has. And we also had, and he's here in Virginia Beach, and we had Jacinth Paris, real estate agent from Fathom Realty that is out that joined us a couple of times out in San Diego. And we really wanted to take a look at how do you start to create your plan? How do you start to create wealth, right? So this is maybe even before you even thought about buying a house. So Scott took us through some of the very basic things that you can start doing ideally when you're really young. But at any point, if you haven't, is to start making sure that you've got a budget in place. We know in this realm that we've been in this last year with rising inflation, that everything costs a little bit more. Maybe not. Your income is keeping pace. So having that budget to make sure that you're staying on target for what your goals are. So having that budget, funding that emergency funding, right? That emergency funding account. So that in the event that you have an unexpected situation or cost, you've got funds set aside to take care of that. And then working, once you've got those two, really working to pay off your existing debt, right? Start paying that down. Choose your balance, your cards, your credit cards, your revolving account that has the highest credit or interest rate, and start paying that down, and just work at that diligently to get your debts closer in line or kind of on target for what your goals are. So Scott walked us through some specifics that we could do in relation to that. And then he talked to us really about retirement planning, right? So again, which option? Do you look at Roth IRAs? Do you look at the traditional IRAs? Making sure that you're looking at TSP and all of the things that go into that, knowing that you can keep your TSP. You can't add to it, but you can keep your TSP account when you do retire or exit the military. So really kind of thinking about tax deferred versus tax free. What are those plans and options? Where do you think you want to be? What are those targets you're trying to hit? And then really starting to contribute as early as possible to these, especially if you have 401ks where there is a matching opportunity. You want to take advantage of free money, right? Why wouldn't you want to do that sooner rather than later? So getting that budget set up, getting your emergency fund set up, getting debts under control, and paying yourself for your future by starting and investing in your retirement accounts. And then we talked, Jacinth came in and really talked to us about what real estate looks like as an investment property versus kind of like your primary residence. You're going to look at those through two different lenses. If I'm looking for my personal home, my forever home, I'm going to be a little bit more picky in some of the specifics, maybe the floor layout. I'm going to get the things I personally want. And if I'm looking at it strictly as a short-term or long-term investment, if it's a second home I'm going to be renting out, or if I'm buying an investment property that I know I'm going into with the idea that I'm going to rent it or flip it, I'm going to be looking at that home from a different lens. So really be thinking about what is the purpose that your real estate is going to play in the short term as well as the long term to help you make the decisions of which properties to look at and why. And again, we spent an hour, and these, both Scott and Jacinth, were phenomenal. I would highly recommend, if you wanted to get some of those basics and some of that very early on thinking about building wealth or sharing it with your kids, and again, or your friends or coworkers. March, we're going to be talking about really planning that financial success. What I like about that too then is we moved from that into April, which was really talking about then your credit. So we've talked about loans, the VA loans specifically, the income that can be used. And then we wanted to circle back and talk about credit, because your credit matters in almost everything that you do. And there's this debate, is credit a good thing or is it a bad thing? So in April, Ben Smith again, came back and joined me, and we delved into everything credit. It can be good or it can be bad, and that really depends on you, right? Everyone wants the privilege of using credit, but it means you have to be able to maintain it in a positive manner. Pay your bills on time. Be responsible for your actions. Save the items that you want to purchase until you have the ability to pay for them or handle the debt that comes with them. Credit should not be used to spend more than you make. And I know, Dave, you and I have had conversations that going out and buying that motorcycle or going out and buying that big rig, right? That big old jacked up truck at the mom and pop down the street at 14% interest really can play havoc on you all of a sudden when you start thinking about what your future looks like, or running up credit cards and what that does to your buying power. And even if you have the opportunity to do something in the future because of how maybe you mishandled something in the past.
And I think, it's important to note, when we did it in March and we started to talk about, the financial wellness and building wealth and all of that, it is important to keep your debt under control and through a budget, because that factors into what we then rolled into here with the credit. Because if you didn't plan very well, monthly, that's going to affect your credit score, and then ultimately it'll affect your interest rate and your ability to buy.
Well, and your credit score, right? So your credit score is really important because it is the indicator of the health of your overall credit. Your credit is the meat and potatoes that generates that score, but your score is used for things such as, we talked about this, your homeowner's insurance or your car insurance rates are predicated on what your credit score is. What you pay for your credit cards, what you pay in the way of having to put down money up front when you start your utilities. A lot of those things can be based on how you've handled your credit, and your credit score is that main indicator of the overall health that's producing that actual score. So therefore, it is important, right, that you take a look at what is generating that score. Scores are important, but they're not the end all or be all. It is what is your credit history, what is out there, what's that data that is driving that. And if you don't, you really should once a year pull your actual credit report and look at it. It's amazing what the credit bureaus know about you. What is your previous addresses, your previous jobs, every judgment, every public notice that has been out there that is against you, any collections accounts up to 7 to 10 years, if you've got foreclosures or tax liens out there. It's amazing the information that is out there, but also to make sure that it's correct. It is really easy for something to go on your credit report, and if you're not paying attention and it's not yours, it can be really hard to get it off, especially after any kind of length of time. So pull your credit report, annualcreditreport.com, absolutely free. Every year you can pull a credit report from each of the 3 main credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion.
And I would recommend that you do that, periodically through the year. So don't do all 3 at the same time. You could do one every quarter, and then you'll kind of have the ability to keep track of what your actual credit report really looks like.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I was going to kind of add on there about checking your credit. My last name, I have a very common last name. So a lot of times things will get added to your credit, like you were saying, Michelle. So you need to make sure that it's correct. And the only reason I was able to get it off was because of my social security number, but I had to prove it because somebody had defaulted on something and it went on my credit.
Ugh.
So
Yeah,
very
not good.
important. No, not good. I was not a happy camper. But so it is extremely important, like you said, to check it periodically to make sure, yes, it's great to know your score, but you need to make sure that what is on there is correct.
100%. This happens a lot too. If you're a junior, senior, a third, or with really common names, you want to
Yes.
keep a really close eye on that.
Exactly.
And another thing that we get questions a lot of is, well, I pulled, I looked and my Equifax credit score says that, my score is this, or USAA or Bank of America or Wells Fargo. When I look at my bank account, says my credit score is this. Understand that depending on what your credit is being pulled for, there are different formulas that are used to generate a score for that reason. So those are great indicators of where your credit score might be generally, but just because it says that you are a 727 on your FICOscore.com or on Equifax.com, whatever you're using to track your score, doesn't mean when you go have your credit pulled for a car, for a credit card, especially for a home loan, that that exact credit score is going to be what yours is. And it is just a picture in time as well. So just kind of keep that in mind. When you think about credit, also realize that the most recent 12 months is the most important and is weighing the heaviest. But the last 24 months is kind of that big snapshot. So outside of 24 months, if something is really old or getting older and it's been isolated and there's been nothing new, that doesn't really pose any big, huge red flags. But if there's something within that 12 to 24 month, we're going to look a little harder. And if there is something that has been occurring outside of an isolated, identifiable situation that is beyond your control, which divorce is not, that is the biggest indicator of what you're going to do currently and in the future when it comes to credit. So think about that time frame. 2 years, keep your nose clean. And then I would say lastly, when we were talking about credit, I think we fielded some questions and some discussion around credit versus debt. Having credit doesn't mean you necessarily have to incur more debt. You can have a credit card that you pay that balance off in full every month, never pay any interest. Credit cards really don't like when you do that. I do it every month. But you want to build that credit profile where you have the ability, you have that authority to use credit, you use it, you pay it in full. That is a smart use of credit. It is not accumulation of debt that I'm always then trying to play catch up and that I can't afford. So when we talk about credit and debt, or when you hear people talk about credit and debt, they aren't necessarily synonymous to each other. So again, Ben and I spent an hour on this. If you go back and take a look at April and digging into a lot of the specifics, the myth, the big things that affect your credit score, how it affects your credit score, those real deep conversations you'll find back in April. So we moved from April, where we've been, again, kind of talking about getting ready to be able to purchase, making sure we understood loans, making sure we understood kind of the qualifying parameters that went about that. Then we asked Jacinth to come back, again, our realtor with Fathom Realty out in San Diego, and talk to us about, okay, what do we need to consider when we are ready to purchase? So I think my credit's all good, my income's good, I think I'm going to be pretty confident there. As I get ready to buy, what are some of the things I need to consider? So again, Jacinth came back with Fathom Realty, and we also had Julia Vasco, a real estate attorney, join us as we talked about actually thinking about what we wanted to buy. So first, occupancy is going to directly impact the financing options that you have available and the requirements. If I'm going to own or occupy, I have a lot easier qualification parameters. I may have to make I may not have to make a down payment at all, going VA, may have to make a minimal down payment, conventional, I might only have to put 3% down or 2% down. I'm going to have a lot of options, and the qualifying parameters will be a little bit easier than it will be on a second home or an investment property. And that's because you are a lot less likely to default on the home that you live in, that is the roof over your head, than you are on a second home or an investment property that, if you lost that, wouldn't directly impact your day-to-day living situation. So because of that, interest rates, because the risk is higher, your interest rates on those properties are going to be higher. If you're buying an investment or a second home, you're going to have to make more of a down payment. Maybe on a second home, maybe it's as little as 5%, A lot of times 10% investment, you may be have to make 20 to 25% down payment. So kind of thinking about why you're buying it and what your occupancy is going to be on it. Yeah, Dave.
What's the difference between a second home and an investment home?
That is awesome. So a second home is a place you're actually going to visit, generally at least 2 weeks out of the year. That's yours, right? You're going to set it aside. You are going to be there and use it as that second home. Maybe you rent it out the rest of the year. That's okay. But when you're buying it for you to use as a second home. You may or may not be able to use rental income off the bat to qualify for that second home because it is a place you are going to visit. Second home versus your primary home. Primary home, that's where you get your mail. It's where you logically live based on your job, your family. It's also, again, kind of where you spend the majority of your time. That investment property, maybe you visit, maybe you don't, but you don't have any requirements or expectations from a legal standpoint that you're going to occupy it for any period of time. You're buying it straight out of the gate to either flip it maybe and or to rent it immediately. And maybe you want to use some of that rental income to qualify. Great question, Dave. Also, when you're purchasing, and especially the last year or two, we've had a lot of people decide not to do this, but understanding the property standards and what kind of condition that property is in. Get a home inspection. Understand that what you're getting into, right? Is it truly a turnkey move in and there's not going to be anything needed? Or are you going to move in thinking it's turnkey and you're going to find out that there is a huge foundation issue? So it is highly, highly recommended by lenders, by realtors. Get that home inspection, even if it's really just for you to understand and know what you're getting into, or whether it's part of that negotiation process with the seller. But really know what you're getting ready to walk into. And I think Jacinta led a great conversation in kind of that process. Yeah, Dave.
I think that was, as the market heated up, probably 12 to 18 months ago, and people were electing to forego these inspections, down the line, that just does not pay dividends and is not a good plan of action.
No.
So I just, and I watched this as people got desperate because inventory was low, but the buyers were there and people were doing things to try and to outbid the other person. And some were foregoing these inspections. Never a good thing.
Nope. 100% agree. Shame on you. You end up in some situations in that case that you're like, what was I thinking? And then that emergency fund is liquidated because you had some immediate repairs that had to be made that you weren't ready for. Buyer's remorse is real. And Jacinta then also really broke down for us. We spent a good bit of time on talking about the difference between condominium life and condominium financing versus that of kind of single family homes, and understanding the condo association dues, what they're covering, understanding that there are a lot of what you can and can't do. You don't own the property. You really own right from the walls in. That's all you own. So that if the condominium doesn't handle its finances well, you could end up with some special costs that you are then responsible for. It can affect your ability to sell in the future because there's a dependency on how many of the units are primary residences, second homes, or investment properties. So there's a lot that goes into condominiums versus single family homes. So if you're kind of leaning or you're trying to figure out maybe some of the ins and outs and what I ought to know about that, you're going to want to head back to May and listen to Jacinta really kind of talk about condominiums versus the other normal standard kind of properties and some of the things that go in there. Jacinth also went into how important it is to use kind of that expert, right? To interview agents. Just like lenders, agents are not all created equal. So finding an individual that really excels in the location, the type of property, and the usage you are planning on that property is important. This is going to help make sure that your agent can do their job in representing you and bringing to the table that strategy for you to win the offer when you submit that to a potential seller. So make sure that you get really comfortable with your agent, interview a couple, find someone that you know is reputable, that you get along with, that understands your needs, that you know is really hearing you. I think that's important. And then we had Julie come in as our real estate our real estate attorney, and she talked to us about the powers, having that power of attorney, and how important it is when we talk about purchasing or refinancing, when you're talking about property. And actually, there are different kinds of special powers of attorney almost for everything, for finances, for bank accounts, for all of those things. But we were, again, kind of talking about purchasing. So we spent most of the time talking about that real estate specific power of attorney. If there is a possibility, and we know in our world that is, if there is a possibility that you're not going to be able to attend the closing, maybe you're downrange, maybe you know that you are with your contracting job being called up, maybe you know that you're just going to be out of town, or you're buying an investment property and you're not local. You're going to want to start the process early of getting that special power of attorney, because there is very detailed information that has to go in that power of attorney. And you want to start that process early, and you're going to want to make sure that your lender, as well as the attorney or title company that's handling the closing, knows early that there is the possibility or that you're going to be using a power of attorney, because they also have to approve that the power of attorney was done correctly. So we talked about horror stories. We talked about situations where you had people running around that had to go 7 hours to find a notary to be able to get a power of attorney finished and done right before closing. It's a nightmare. So just a reminder, purchasing considerations, even a refinance, if there's that possibility you're not going to be present at closing, get that POA and do it early. That was May. A lot of information back there. You're going to want to hear from Jacinth and Julie. Go check them out. We moved then into, okay, what if I want to talk about selling a property, right? So we've been talking about investments. I've got my property, but now I want to do something with it to either free up some cash, or what are some of the considerations that I need to think about when I'm getting ready to sell? So in June, we had Liam Gilroy. He's a financial advisor with Fortis Wealth Management, come and join us for an hour. And we talked about that. And we talked about some of the specifics. Things that stood out is, one, you need to be strategic if you can, right? If you've got the option of when you list your house, you want to be strategic about when you're selling it, the time of year, the market, the property condition are all going to play a role on whether you're going to get top dollar for your home, or whether you need to lower the price because there's issues. So you're going to want to do your research. Again, interview your listing agents. You want to clean, declutter. If there are spruce up, get your landscaping all in order. All of those will directly impact what you might net in the way of proceeds when you go to sell. Huge, right? Last couple of years, shoot, last year and a half, if you thought about selling, you knew you were going to make some money, because that's just where the market was. That's not the norm. We're back to kind of heading in that normal situation. So really be thinking about what can you do that is going to position your house for that top dollar that helps your bottom line. Which then means we need to talk about, and we did, capital gains. What happens when you do sell? And what tax taxes may you owe and how to think about those. So with capital gains, if it's a second home or an investment property and you're just kind of selling it outright, you're going to owe taxes. It's not your primary residence. But the IRS does give an exemption, an exclusion for a primary residence if you have lived in it 2 of the last 5 years. So if you're selling a house and you lived in it 2 of the last 5 years, military active duty is longer, it's 10 years, then you can consider that your primary residence. And there are exclusions for for a portion of those net proceeds. If you file your taxes as a single individual, the first $250,000 of net proceeds, and that's even after your the improvements that you paid for. Maybe you put a new driveway in, a new roof on, maybe you did an addition, and you can back out those costs. Your tax accountant will absolutely help with this, as will your financial advisor, but you are able to exclude the first $250,000 of net proceeds on a sale of a primary residence. If you file married, it's $500,000. So just keep that in mind. When you do sell, that there's going to be some taxes along with the costs that you may incur when Uncle Sam comes calling at the end of the year. Yeah, Dave.
Yeah, and I think it's important to understand that if it's a principal residence, you can do that. You can get those exclusions every 2 years.
Yep. So you can buy, own it for 2 years, live in it for 2 years, sell, get that exclusion, buy again. And exactly 100%, that is correct based on tax law today. And just always make sure that you are checking with your tax advisor to see if there have been any changes and or updates. But I think that's important. And now, Dave, have you ever used the 1031 exchange process?
I actually did when I was in San Diego. I sold a property and I did not want to take the capital gains, so I did a 1031 Starker exchange in order to locate a different property, and I had 179 days to identify the property and then move that money into or roll that money into the next sale. The issue is at a certain point, as you get older, eventually you will have to identify those gains, even though you were able to defer them with your first property or maybe subsequent properties. Eventually you will have to come to grips with the capital gains.
It defers them. It doesn't make you exempt from them. That is important.
Correct.
Yep. But we had a lengthy conversation in June with Liam, who really talked about that 1031 exchange, that property swap. So if you had an investment property and you weren't ready to experience those capital gains at that point, maybe you thought that the tax environment might be better in the future, then you sell within this 1031 exchange, buy the new home within a certain amount of time frame, deferring those capital gains on that sell to a later date. Absolutely.
I think it was important that he ensured that everyone knew that the 1031 exchange is for like-kind property. If it was a single family residence, you cannot move forward and buy a condo. It needs to be like-kind. Absolutely.
Great call out. 100%. So definitely, if you are in that point in life when you're thinking about selling properties, make sure that you're considering all the tax ramifications and all of the options. Talk to those experts. Okay. From that point, we circled back. So Ben came back with us in July, and we talked about specifically your assets. So when you go to qualify, what kind of money might you need for down payment, closing costs, and reserves? So the things that we kind of talked about then, I think that really jumped out, is that the lender's going to need to be able to verify your assets. complete documentation is king, right? So we hear cash is king. Cash is going to make us a little crazy. Cash is difficult to trace. It might not be able to be counted as an asset if it cannot be sourced, verified, and documented. So cash is not king unless it happens to be in your bank account and can be completely documented. Usually that's looking at the most recent 2 years of your, 2 months of your bank statements to see what has happened during that time frame. So get that money in a bank account, let it season at least 2 full months so that when we look at your bank statements, that documentation is complete and there aren't these major changes that are taking place. We also talked about in your assets that insufficient funds or overdraft fees are red flags to lenders. So you're like, well, I paid it, but it means that you're having issues in managing your money. So insufficient funds, those NSFs or those overdraft fees, your lender's going to have some hard questions on and are going to be considered in your overall profile. A lot of loan programs allow gift funds, but you need to talk to your lender about this upfront as early as possible because there's a lot of verification that may have to be done both from the giftor as well as the giftee during that process. So make sure that you are kind of anticipating what you're going to be using in the way of assets and have those conversations. If you want your earnest money to count towards your assets or your down payment or your closing costs, just make sure your earnest money is coming from a bank account that you're using on that particular transaction. And then lastly, just making sure we're taking that picture in time that you've talked to your loan officer before depositing any funds, transferring funds, opening or closing accounts, or making purchases. That approval that you have is a picture in time. And if that picture changes, then that qualification, that approval may change before closing. So just be aware of that. That was July. Compliments of Ben and I. Go back and check that out. And then in August, Jacinth came back again. We love Jacinth. With Fathom Realty. And she was joined by one of her home inspectors, Jeff Ermis with Excel Inspection, that came and talked to us a little bit about now that you own the home, what do you need to consider? First and foremost, on the lending side, if you have any mortgage questions, payment concerns, you're concerned that you may be getting behind, you've got some life changes that have occurred, pick up the phone and call your servicer. They want to work things out. They want to answer your questions. They want to help you understand your escrow account or why that payment went up because your homeowner's insurance went up. That's what they're there for. And then Jeff spent a good 30 minutes talking about home inspections and what are the things that you need to do as a homeowner to really keep your home in best working order. Out of the gate, upkeep and preventive maintenance is the #1 way to keep your home value up and to keep your expenses lower. And water is the #1 enemy typically to your home, whether that's foundation issues, whether that is leaks, any of the water is not your friend when it comes to owning a home. So make sure from a landscaping perspective, plumbing perspective, roof perspective, that things are in order. Yeah, Dave.
I think he came up with 2 different things that were very important. And, you talked about water, especially in this area where the water table is so high. It's important. Crawl spaces, most of the houses here are on crawl spaces. So they're going to talk about moisture. They're going to talk about, some sort of ability to remediate the water that's under your crawl space, that kind of thing. And the second thing that he talked about was ensuring that you have a sinking fund for your house, which is, something that, the reason why they call it a 30-year roof is that's, pretty much how long it's going to be. So the idea was that you would save a little bit of money each month to stave off some of those major repairs like roofs, HVAC kind of things that are major in nature. He pointed that out, which I thought was really good. A really good thing.
So again, we talk all of these topics. We go very in depth in, and just giving you a heads up of where you can find them. Jacinthe hopped on and she talked about then, okay, you own it. Now, what if you wanted to do some remodeling? What kind of return of investment could you get? Now, this is always kind of fun and interesting. So from a small ticket standpoint, if you're looking for that return on investment, maybe you're thinking about selling, or you're trying to figure out what you can do to spruce things up. A fresh coat of paint generally is going to return to you 107% of what you spent. New garage doors, 97.5%. New wood floors, 118%. But if you already have wood floors, so maybe it's not as expensive and you're just going to refinish them, you can expect a return on your investment of 147%. And imagine it, closets. If you update and renovate your closet, that's a really kind of cool selling feature, and you can probably expect to gain about 83% of your return on investment, according to some of the research that Jacinthe done and shared with us back in August. From a larger ticket item, if you looked at a minor remodel, so it means you're really not changing the location and you know, gutting everything and putting up walls or taking down walls, but a minor kitchen remodel, you could expect to return about 92.5% of what you spent. A complete kitchen remodel, because it is so expensive out of the gate, 75%. A medium bathroom remodel, again, so really not doing anything terribly extravagant or moving a whole lot of walls or really bumping things out, you're looking at about 71% of return on investment. Replacing your roof and windows, which also keeps you warm and dry, 80%, and then siding replacement at 92.9, almost 93% return on investment for those items. And then she also talked about whether you're looking to purchase or whether you are selling, and maybe you're trying to think of, or maybe you're just trying to figure out what you could do for when you do sell down the line. What are some of the things that are hot in the market that we're in today? Accessory dwelling units, so that mother-in-law suite, the room over the garage, finished room over the garage, those accessory dwellings, huge right now, especially out in San Diego. A separate home office or a room for hobbies within the house. So not just taking a bedroom and converting it, but actually having a room that it was built for and its intended use was as a office or a room for hobbies, right? Or wrapping paper. It's that time of year, wrapping paper room. And then outdoor living spaces, huge right now, huge benefit when you go to either buy or sell. In September, we had Jenny Brown, an attorney and certified financial planner, come and join us, along with Mike Frazier with Legacy Planning Group, financial advisor, to talk to us now more about estate planning. So Jenny was great in talking about, at minimum, having your advanced medical directive. That's your living will, your durable power of attorney, and your will and trust in place. And you're never too young to have those, especially your advanced medical directive and a durable power of attorney. If you're, minor child, not minor so much because you still have the ability to have say there, but let's say you've got, your 18-year-old son or daughter, and they don't have durable power of attorney, that you have the opportunity to step in, or a advanced medical directive. You could be hard pressed to be making some of those decisions or having access to some of that information. And then making sure that you've got that will or trust, whichever works for you. We talked a little bit about both, but to have those in place, have something in place, trying to keep the IRS, the government out of your business, and be able to really dictate what you've got going where. So ensuring that your assets are titled properly for your beneficiaries, that the allocations and transfers are all set up, and that you've considered your inheritors and where they may be and what they may need as well, right? So there was some discussion about kind of thinking about if they all of a sudden, somebody that is on Medicare receives a huge inheritance, what that might do, or on Medicaid, how that might impact their qualification processes. So really being able to understand how you're planning today for your estate, taking into consideration your beneficiaries that will be receiving it on the other end. And then Mike Frazier. Mike could talk for an hour and a half just on Social Security alone, much less we talked about Social Security and minimum required distributions. But Social Security, there are a lot of options as to when you take it, how you take it, how it affects you financially, how it affects your taxes. No two people have the same situation. So ensuring that you know what your goals are and then having honest conversations with experts as to what those options are that will help you reach those goals and doing your research. I'm pretty good at research, but there's tons of information out there and I don't want to try to figure it out myself. And then they also talked at age 72 about taking required minimum distributions in your tax deferred retirement accounts. So you've got to, law requires age 72, you have to start taking minimum distributions out. If you don't, the government's going to get in your business and they're going to fine you, and it is hefty fines. So understanding what your options will be, how you can take them, how much you have to take ahead of time will save you a lot of energy at the end, right? When you have to start taking them or put you in a position that you aren't taking them and the government comes into your pockets. Yes, Dave.
So what happens if you turn 72, but your spouse is significantly younger?
Woo. That's when I call Mike Frazier and I say, what do I do?
Okay.
I honestly don't know the answer to that question. We
Fair
probably talked about it,
Fair enough.
but that is when you would do a lot of research or just pick up the phone and call a well-respected expert in that field. Mike Frazier did a great job talking us through that. Liam would be another great individual, as would Scott as well. So again, if you are looking for contacts, you can always reach out to Dave or myself to get you in touch with any of them. I know we're at 7:30. We've got 2 more months to get through. Since this is just being taped and people can stop listening whenever they want or fast forward, are you good if we keep going through the next 2 months?
Yep, absolutely.
Perfect.
Definitely.
Perfect. Okay. In October, Ben came back again, and we really talked about with the home and being able to access the equity that's in it, right? So that equity is that amount of money that you have invested in the property, either through paying the loan down or through the appreciation that property value has had. And that there are reasons that borrowing against, right? Because you don't get that equity unless you sell. Otherwise, if you want to tap into that equity, you've got to borrow against it in some form or fashion. And there can be really smart reasons to do that, right? You can use it for home improvement projects. You may be using it as an education fund. Maybe it's something that is going to improve your overall financial situation, or it's going to help, right, in meeting on a fixed income later in life, some of those bills that you may have. So really understanding what equity is. We did a whole discussion on that. Why you may, what are some of the key reasons people actually tap into it, but then also because there are so many options in tapping into that, right? There's a regular refinance just to lower the rate term. There is a cash out refinance where you're pulling money out of the home. Maybe you're paying off an ex-spouse. Maybe you want to do some updates to the property. So you're actually pulling money out and you're using a regular mortgage transaction to do that. And then there's second mortgages that fall behind your first mortgage that you already have that you can take out using that extra equity that you have. And whether you look at a home equity line of credit or a second home equity loan, the tax ramifications that are there, good and or bad, kind of looking into that. We also talked about reverse mortgages. So as an individual that may be on a fixed income or having family members that may be on a fixed income, looking at a reverse mortgage where they don't have to make a monthly payment. In fact, they may get money on a monthly basis or be able to tap into that money, that equity, and not have to repay it until they go and sell the house or until they pass. So we delved into the different types of options that are out there. It's going to be really important that you do your homework and consult with your lender and a financial advisor or tax accountant when you're determining what options to look at that are going to give you the best opportunity to meet your goals. And then understanding that accessing equity does come with its own closing costs. It's another loan, right? You haven't sold the house, so it's not net proceeds. You are borrowing against that equity. So there's going to be closing costs in most cases for the type of loan that you are doing. You have a higher potential for closure risk. So those terms for those second mortgages can be a little bit higher from a qualifying standpoint. And you lower your equity position, right? If I'm borrowing against it, if I pulled that money out, then when I go to sell, that loan's got to also be paid off. I'm not receiving as much in the way of my net proceeds because I've got more outstanding on that property. So again, we spent an hour, Ben and I, really kind of digging into the nitty gritty on home equity, how and when you might access it, and things to think about. Which takes us just to last month. And in November, we had Christina Drum-Boyd, who is a senior care advisor with Care Connect of Hampton Roads. And I want to say this is probably the one that was the most eye-opening on my end, because it's not something that I've been terribly knowledgeable about. I know it's looming out there, but it's not something that I've talked to a financial advisor about yet. It's not something that I have talked to an attorney about yet. I haven't experienced it for the most part yet, but I'm starting to see as my parents get older, as Mike and I start to get older, how do you start planning for your long-term needs, your long-term care needs? Your long-term, when we talk about whether it's for yourself or your family, there are real financial considerations that have to be looked at. It is amazing just as we look at how fast our population is aging. I think they're calling it the silver tsunami, that being able to be prepared. If you are coming at this from a crisis standpoint, something has happened and you're trying to figure this out, you don't get to make the best decisions. So being able to have some effective planning up front that you can identify your personal needs, or maybe again, you're going to be a caretaker for a family or a friend, understanding what those needs are so you can manage the costs, minimize your stress, and allow you to be proactive in that decision making. It can be a very heart-wrenching time in and of itself. And if you aren't prepared, you're making it that much harder on yourself and others. I got a little nervous when Christina was started throwing out these numbers, but the average annual cost of long-term care, if you're in a nursing home, so we're not even talking about Westminster like here in Virginia Beach, but if you're looking at basic nursing home care outside of the home, right? So you're in a nursing home, $120,000 a year on average. If you're going to take care of it yourself, or you're going to be that caretaker and you may be using maybe just some aids to help with babysitting, right? Or maybe moving you back and forth to locations, but you're really, for the most part, it's personal care. You're looking at that costing out of pocket, probably almost $33,000 on average. And if you're having in-home health care, where you've got health, those nurses, those certified individuals that are coming into your home, those true health aides, you're looking at close to $87,600 a year on average as of last year. So it's not cheap. And if you haven't been considering it, it is again better to get in front of that tsunami than it is to have it, kind of just roll right over you. And where are do these funds come from, right? Are you going to be covering these costs? Is your family going to be covering these costs? Are you going to be looking at reverse mortgages or using some of the equity in your house to help with this? Is Medicare going to play a part in that? Are you able to qualify for Medicaid? Because Medicaid, what it covers is immense, but it's not so much with Medicaid about what your monthly income is. That's a fairly decent normal amount, but it has to do with how much you have in assets. which usually it's about $2,000. You have to have like $2,000, no more, in personal liquid assets that you have at your disposal. So you may have to be paying down, spending down other accounts to get to that point. But she talks a lot about Medicaid, private long-term care insurance. There are long-term care policies that are out there. Get them when you're younger. They go a lot farther than if you try to get them now. Once you're over 50, which I am. And then for a lot of us, right, the VA, our VA disability, VA pension benefits that are out there can also help. But it was eye-opening as to all of the things to consider as you start thinking about either yourself, again, your parents, trying to figure out how you're going to navigate this world as we get older. And a lot of us are going to be there sooner rather than later. So again, huge hour-long conversation. Christina ran the whole thing. I just popped in with some questions here or there, but very, very educational. So with that, that was a year's worth of information in an hour and 9 minutes. Actually, an hour, 11 minutes. If you do have questions, feel free, please reach out to Dave, Kim, Gary at the association, reach out to myself. Happy to either get you in touch with and or answer the questions. And then as we sit down next week and as your association really looks at ways to bring added value to you guys, if you have topics, if you have ideas that you would love to share, we would love to hear them. So please definitely let us know. With that, Dave, I'm going to come off of sharing, come back and join you guys and hand the floor back to you on this December night.
Well, thank you very much. And as always, the amount of information that was put in each month was kind of mind-boggling. I mean, as we went through all 11 months, it's phenomenal how much ground you actually covered. And I wanted to thank you and the teammates that you brought in, all the experts, absolutely amazing. And I think this is information that it was tremendous to share. I think it was great that it's recorded. I think you would be remiss if the folks didn't go out and review just a little bit or segments that they need at the time, because the information is absolutely just mind-boggling that you had put together. So thank you so much. And, I can't wait to see what we're going to do for 2023.
It's going to be a fun ride. Have a good one, guys. And
All right,
Merry
thanks.
Christmas and Happy New Year.
Yes,
You
you as
too.
well.
Thanks.
All right, bye.
Bye.